Hello again, everyone. It's good to have you with us for this event. It figures to be an exceptional one that doesn't need any buildup.
Hey, you guys ready for some football? We're the old goats. I got Ogre with me,
Goat.
Hoffa, and we're going to celebrate the 100 years of the NFL along with the NFL and talk about every champion, not just the Super Bowl champions. We're going to hit up from the beginning, which is 1920, all the way through to this year's title game. And we're going to touch on the season a little bit. And we're going to do 4 parts. This is part 1. We're going to take you through 1959. Part 2 is going to be 60 through 69. And then we're going to split up the modern era in half, probably, leading up to this Super Bowl in 2020, which is Super Bowl 54. Hard to believe.
Wow.
Super Bowl 54, right?
It's crazy.
Yeah. So let's go deep, man. Bombs away. How did this whole thing get started, Ogre?
Well, back in 1920, pro football really, there were leagues, there were teams, but there wasn't anything that was cohesive. College football ruled the day. And even back from, kind of as a segue back to the Old West, pro football really started in 1892 when Puff Hufflefinger.
Great name.
You sure he wasn't a gynecologist?
There's accounts that he played guard. Some people said he played quarterback. Nobody knows what the hell happened with Puff Hufflefinger.
It's hard to get info
from 1892.
There's no game footage. There's like newspaper clippings. Some of the stuff is lost. It's crazy.
Right. Secondhand accounts and stuff like that. But they paid Puff Hufflefinger $500 to be quarterback, apparently, for the Allegheny Athletic Association.
That's what they
like
paid
that.
Joey Harrington.
It showed up in the accounting
Whatever they
forms.
paid him, it was too much.
It showed up in the accounting forms, and they made $600 overall on the game. But for the first time, we have record of somebody getting paid to play football. So that's pro football right there.
And I'm sorry, the year again on that was?
That was 1892.
Right, because that's when you become a professional, when you get to start getting paid for it. Otherwise, you're an amateur.
That's the term, right? I mean,
yeah.
if you're a professional, when you get paid. So then that was the very beginnings, but pro football was, pardon the expression, was really the Wild West. We had weird rules.
That's a good episode. Check that one
By
out.
the way,
Yeah.
in Puff Hufflefinger, he picked up a fumble and ran it 30 yards in for a score for a 4-0 victory.
Wow.
Touchdowns were worth 4 points back in 1892, and a field goal was worth 5.
So a field goal is what you really wanted.
But you only hit like 50% of them, right?
Wow.
Because you were hitting the ball straight on. That whole soccer style kicking, we're going to get to that in 1962 with Pete Goliak. But that whole soccer style thing was a revolution, man. But up until that point, you had straight on kickers.
Yeah, the
field goal.
Polacks. The Polacks hadn't hit the...
Now you're confusing.
The Polacks hadn't hit the
It's Pete
gridiron.
Goliak, not Polak.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, he was the first pro football player, and then we had the advent of the forward pass was legalized in 1905, and you had weird rules for that. You had to be beyond 5 yards of the line of scrimmage to throw a pass, and if it fell incomplete, the defense took over where the ball fell. Crazy rules.
Otherwise, you're playing kind of rugby before that point, right?
That's where it originated.
You're
from.
just laterally.
Lateral. Rugby,
There was very few passes in those
there weren't
games.
any, man. And the passing game, like the New York Times had said, that this idea of the passing game is a fancy, just passing fad. Pardon the pun, right? They said that this will make the game actually go backwards. So, the passing game, it came into 1905. College picked up on it, and college football was huge. But here's where we had the problem, right? You had stars for 4 years. They left and graduated, and where did they go? There wasn't any organized sports of any kind for them to go into. There were professional teams or professional leagues, but nothing cohesive. College football was under one umbrella, everybody played by the same rules, and that's what made college football great, right? Plus the pageantry and all that shit that made college football fun.
It's organized.
It was organized. There were rules, and everybody followed them. But once you graduated, where'd you go? There was no place for you to go. So then, at that point, there was an agreement amongst some big cities, mostly Eastern and Midwestern, to say, let's build some football teams together, and let's organize ourselves under one banner, and play by the same set of rules. And that's what happened with pro football finally in 1920 with the formation of the American Professional Football Association,
which is the early incarnation of the
NFL
National Football League. Okay.
So this was the
Different name, same league.
This was and by the way, this is not the first National Football League. There was another one called National Football League as well in 1903, but it quickly folded.
Unassociated. Okay.
Unassociated.
Yeah, we're
just
gonna
kind
get
of-
into that later. Like AFLs, how many AFLs there was, other little leagues that
Four of them.
folded. Yeah,
Four versions, right?
and the AAFC and that's
So
later. But
the APFA, imagine having that on the NFL Shield. I mean, it's just I almost feel like what's that pet APSA or something like that? It's way too similar to it. The AFPA, was it? Anyway, they were called that for 2 years. And then in 1922, they decided to change
Yeah,
their
it's
name.
not very catchy.
No, it's not. Then in 1922, they decided to change their name to the National Football League, and as they say, the rest is history at that point. But so that's kind of the shortened history. There's a lot of crazy little rules. I mean, it looked like if you watch old videos, people get tackled multiple times. Like you get up and you can run again. It's crazy. The rules didn't make a whole lot
like
of
they didn't really
sense.
know what they were doing out there.
I don't think that there was. I mean, we see it
Wasn't
really
too
wasn't.
many spin moves and jukes back
No, there
then.
wasn't any of that. And it was really a rugby scrum, is what it was. You hiked the ball, and 15 guys, because it was 15 guys on each side of the line of scrimmage, would just. It was like a circle jerk, basically, of
Wow.
everybody around the football, and it was just a running game. That's all it was. Very caveman, very archaic.
Not too popular at the time. Baseball was king.
But baseball was king, but college football was still giving it a run for its
Yeah.
money, and college
You're
football
right.
wasn't that different. The NFL decided when they first started in 1920, or the APFA, that they would just adopt college football's rules. A lot of them were pretty archaic as well, and I'm going to get into a few of those as well. But they decided to adopt a lot of college football rules when they started, and they started to evolve as time went on. So I think we're going to start. I got the toughest job, I think, trying to describe the 1920s of football and make it sound exciting, but I think I can. So with 1920, scheduling was left to every team. There was no Packers, which was 1921, but let's say the Bears were around the 1920. They were the Decor Staleys, is what they were called. They were left to fill their own schedule.
To like book your schedule.
Book your schedule, and you could play out of league opponents.
Yes.
You could play a college all-star team. It would count in the standings.
You could play a college team too, I think,
play a
right?
college team.
Yeah. You could play like a barnstorming team, maybe.
one of those traveling teams
Yeah.
and shit like that.
That's crazy.
You can play anybody. So you had teams that played only 4 games. You had teams that played 13 and 15. And it didn't really matter who you played in 1920. They still counted that into the schedule, into the standings. Ties didn't
Right.
count. If you played a tie game, it's as if you didn't play it. It wasn't until 1972 where ties were treated as a half win. So if you're 13-1-1, you're just 13-1.
I heard something. You probably know it. I don't know which of you guys has that era. There was an instant where a team was kind of declared the winner, and the one that was in second place just ended up booking 2 more games quickly and winning them to then claim we have a better record. We're the champions because they just booked a couple games. I don't know if that's on one of your guys' thing, but I read that somewhere.
There was
It's crazy.
there was a really shady moment by the NFL in 1921 that I'm going to get into that that it kind of speaks of kind of like that. I think that might have happened in your era, in Hoffa's era. I don't know if you read about that.
Maybe it was in one of these AFL ones. I don't know, somewhere. I read it somewhere.
All right, so let's start. 1920, scheduling left to every team. Decor Staleys, Chicago Cardinals. Those 2 teams still play to this day as the Arizona Cardinals and as the Chicago Bears. The champion of that league was the Akron Pros, who were 8-0-3. And about that era, about that season, there were 12 0-0 games played that year.
Wow.
12 tieless, scoreless games.
Like a soccer game.
There hasn't been one. Do you know the last time that we had a scoreless NFL game? 1943.
Wow.
And we had 12 of them in this year alone. And on top of that, only one game that entire year, 2 teams scored more than 20 points. So you had a really different brand of football. How many teams today? How many games today where both teams scored 20 points?
I mean, yeah, it's the majority usually.
It's
Unless I don't think the Dolphins hit 20. Did they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah,
They did. Exactly. So there was no championship game. It was just play out your schedule. Let's see who has the better winning percentage. That was really what it was all about. But not counting ties. Remember, ties don't count at all. And there were several instances where, had you factored that tie, a different champion would have been named.
It almost sounds like you could make a paper champion. Like, let's book a real easy schedule because we'll have the most wins. You could book your own schedule. It's so weird, man.
And the winner,
Patriots would have really exploited that freaking rule.
The winner of the, like I said, the Akron Pros. Here's the interesting thing about the Akron Pros: undefeated, 8-0-3. They voted on who would win, and the vote was forgotten for 50 years. We had forgotten who won the championship in 1920 until the NFL in 1971 found the vote and was able to declare a winner. Hey, you know what? We found this old
Why did
vote.
they have to vote?
Because that's how you did it. You didn't. There was no championship. You voted on the champion.
It wasn't on the best winning percentage?
Not in 1920. In 1921, they decided to go on.
So kind of like college football it used to be where they
where
do
you have an
polls.
AP poll in college football. Here you had I don't know who was if it was owners that were voting but
Maybe the AP.
I don't think
Associated
they were
Press.
Yeah, they were around back
I
then.
think they were, man. Yeah, because I have in one of these competing AFLs they mentioned them, so I know that at least in the 30s they were around. I would think they were around.
So
Anyways.
let's shift attention now to 1921. Chicago Bears, the last year that they're going to be called the Chicago Staleys. They actually moved from Decorah. They went 9-1-1, and they
Where is
beat.
Decorah? I'm sorry.
I think it's Illinois. It's another Illinois team. They beat the Buffalo All-Americans that year. And there was controversy about this one. This is a really interesting one. They had played already a regular season game, and Buffalo won 7-6. The season ended. Had they not played another game, Buffalo would have won the championship that year. But Chicago, after November 14th, asked, let's do a rematch. Exhibition doesn't count. And they played it. Chicago won 10-7, and the NFL said, whoa, we're going to count it. And they counted it.
Patriot style.
Patriot style. And there was an archaic APFL rule that said that in a tiebreaker, and they don't use this rule anymore, thank God. In a tiebreaker where 2 teams won a game, it's the second game that counts. Can you believe that?
Wow.
That was an APFA rule that if you played a tiebreaker and you both won, the second game is one that matters. So
crazy.
You weren't supposed to count that game after November 14, I think. Anything after November 14, it should be an exhibition game. The NFL changed their mind, counted the game, which gave them a higher winning percentage, and George Halas had his first world championship.
Otherwise, the champ would have been
Buffalo.
wow, a team that doesn't even exist today.
Right,
Well,
right.
at least not that incarnation of it. We have
Right.
the Bills.
So that's a very interesting first example of the NFL screwing someone over. And to this day, people in Buffalo, it's actually still remembered. They haven't won. Well, actually, they did one in the AFL, but we'll get to that way later. So 1922, 23, 24, I'm going to kind of package those into one big combo because it was all the same team that won them, but different cities. Right? We had, and probably one of the great teams of all time, if you think about it, right? 3 straight years they win. Canton Bulldogs, they go 10-0-2 in 22, 11-0-1 in 23. So we're looking at 21-0-3 over 2 seasons. They win both championships. Then in 24, the owner of the Cleveland Indians, not the baseball team, the football team, buys the Canton Bulldogs, moves them to Cleveland because Cleveland was defunct, just renames them, right? It's called mothballing. He takes the team, he renames them to his city. So now they're the Cleveland Bulldogs. They proceed to win their 3rd straight championship, 7-1-1. So you're looking at, what's that, 28-1-4 over 3 seasons.
Wow.
There's your dynasty, right? We could officially say I think that's our first now NFL dynasty because we changed the name.
And the team folded not too long after that, right?
About 2 years after.
Which is crazy. Such a dominating. I guess it's a different time.
What you had the enrollment of teams, it would jump from season to season, 22, 12, as low as 8 in 1925. So you had a lot of turnover, a lot of teams leaving.
They would just not assemble the team again, or guys wouldn't come back, stuff like that.
Well, the NFL in 24 decided to contract from 22 teams to 12 to only keep the most financially stable teams. Build a base off that and see where we go. And that's basically the idea the NFL did in the mid-1920s. Right. So 1925, we got the Chicago Cardinals, right? They win their first title, 11-2-1. They beat the Pottsville Maroons.
So the oldest two teams in the NFL were both out of Chicago.
Well, you had the
Were the Cardinals out of Chicago?
The Cardinals were originally out of
Cardinals
Chicago,
and the Bears.
but the Bears were out of Decorah, which
and then
is
later Chicago.
Chicago, right? But
Okay.
Decatur, I don't know how you pronounce it.
I think it's Decatur.
Is like 100 miles from Chicago. I mean, they're basically Chicago teams. I mean, it's what they amount to. So 25, I said the Chicago Cardinals, 11-2-1, beat the Pottsville Maroons, who fold and come back the following year or two again as the Pottsville Maroons. And a lot of other teams, were actually two teams named the Maroons at the same time, which...
Why do you need two Maroons?
What a maroon!
Wasn't it?
Maroony 4.
Well, in the CFL, I think you have two teams that are the Rough Riders.
Are there?
Yeah, I think
I
there
didn't
is.
know that.
Yeah, there's one
Well,
team.
Canadians are kind of gay. So
Yeah.
Rough Riders.
There's two teams in the CFL that have the same name.
All right. So 1926, Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, 14-1-2. They go under about 2 years later.
That's the champ.
Yep, 14-1-2. Here's the year. 1927, league goes from 22 to 12 teams.
Can I stop you real quick there a second?
Yeah, what do you got
'Cause
for 20?
1926, we got the first incarnation of the AFL. Was Red Grange? I'm sure Red Grange was playing in some of these teams that you've been mentioning, right?
He eventually makes it in 29 or 30.
Because he's
Well, in 33, Red Grange was playing ready for the Bears.
He came in like 8 or 9 years after the league started.
because 1926 Red Grange and his agent they want to get a NFL franchise and they don't allow them to, so they put him as vice president of this first incarnation of the AFL, and they say, all right, we'll just start our own league then if you're not going to let us in, and they booked their own games like you said. There was no stats.
Not until 1932.
Yeah,
No stats.
in the NFL either.
That boggles my mind that you would watch a game and go, all right, that guy just ran for 4 yards. I'm not going to track it. And what the hell's that about?
How would you know who was good? I don't know. It's weird. Because baseball had stats,
I guess it's whoever gets in the end zone the most, right?
I guess.
Yeah.
Actually, Tim Mara of the Giants is the one who didn't want these guys in. It's like little kids almost. Like, we don't let you play with us. Oh, we're going to go play over here, and...
It's my ball going home.
Yeah.
That rat bastard mentality is what led to the AFL starting in 1960, but we'll get to that.
These guys played a lot of games against NFL teams, so they matched up quite a bit. I think it only lasted 1 year. I think it was only for 1926. There was too many teams. You just talked about that downsizing. When these guys came in, I think there were over 30 teams, and they figured out they couldn't maintain that. There wasn't enough to go around, and they did exactly what you were just talking about.
It's hard to organize 8, 12, 14, 16 people all with the same idea. Hey, let's run this. You run your own individual franchise, I'll run mine. And it's hard to keep that going 16 different times, or 30 in this case of that league.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find stability, and that's what the NFL was dealing with at first.
Some of these guys had cool names too. Like, there was a player here, Wildcat Wilson. I love some of these old school
Yeah, they
names.
don't use those nicknames nowadays.
They should, man.
They should, man.
Wahoo McDaniel, remember him?
What are the
Chief
best
Wahoo
common modern era nicknames for you?
Probably Daryl Moose Johnston.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
Megatron was a pretty good one.
Megatron's a good one.
Yeah.
Actually,
Beast Mode.
Roy Williams is the one that came up with the...
Yeah, for him. I thought Beast Mode was a good one for
Yeah, but it could
Marshawn.
get cheesy. Ministry of Defense.
Yeah.
Was that Reggie White?
Legion of Boom.
Reggie White. No, he was called the minister.
The Minister of
The
Defense.
Minister of Defense.
Yeah,
I
'cause
think
he
that was
like
a Chris Berman thing.
He was like a preacher. Or something.
Anyways, but they had cool names back then. So yeah, I just wanted to throw in that little our first AFL incarnation, and I think it only lasted that 1 year. Also known as the Red Grange League.
1927, and we said the league went down to 12 stable teams. New York Giants win their first championship, 11-1-1. Right, a lot of ties. Their teams have up to 6 ties in a season. 1928, Providence Steamrollers.
No overtime, right?
No overtime.
Yeah.
We'll get to the first overtime game ever played. But the Providence Steamrollers, 8-1-2, right?
Good name.
Steamrollers.
At least it's not the Cleveland Steamers, right? All right, so now 1929, 1930, 1931. I can kind of bundle these all up there. Green Bay Packer championship years, right? So what do we got? We got an undefeated
3 in a row, right?
3 in a row. They did it twice, right?
That's
Only team to win it. Only team to do it ever once, and they did it twice.
Because Kenton Bulldogs? They
Yeah,
did two?
but because they're different cities, I guess technically.
I'm not gonna give it to the
Curly
Packers,
Lambeau
though.
already the head coach of the Packers.
Oh, good thing you reminded me about that. Curly Lambeau.
Oh, Jesus.
1922. 1922. That's a great one. 1922. The Packers were going to lose their franchise completely because it was deemed that they had picked.
Oh, if only.
It was deemed that they had used college players that were still enrolled in college in the games.
Sure they did.
Oh, yeah, everybody turns a blind eye.
Probably wasn't the Patriots.
So, wait till 1960 on that one. So their used college players, the NFL was going to take the team away and either give it away or contract it, fold it, whatever. Curly Lambeau, which I know you hate,
Yes.
$50. He paid $50 for the franchise to own it back, but he needed another $2,400. He didn't have that type of money. He was short on it. He spoke to the vendors in Green Bay. They all decided to, as a community, to build that $2,400 that they needed for the team, and that's how they became the first community-owned football team. And to this day, it's the people who own the Green Bay Packers.
Right.
It's amazing.
Isn't that great?
All the inbreds of Green Bay.
This is what's amazing to me about that. How much would you say a typical stadium of
Now?
that era?
Oh.
Well, yeah, now I know. But like of that era, what do you think? I mean, there was some big college stadiums. I know that.
What do you mean, the cost?
No, attendance capacity.
Oh, you had 60 to 70,000.
Okay.
And then you still had the
The
Rose
ones
Bowl that had
the ones that
100.
really packed the most were the West Coast stadiums.
There was.
the
They were
Rams.
40, I think.
But that happened way later,
with
though. The
wooden
Rams
seats
weren't
and
around
everything.
till like way later. They were actually the Cleveland Rams, I think. What I'm saying is, if you look up the population of Green Bay, even if every person in the city of Green Bay went to the game, which they probably did, you couldn't fill the stadium. That's what's amazing that they were able to do that.
Oh, the Rams were already LA Rams in '49.
There was a Cleveland Rams, though.
Are
There
they
was
the
a
same
Cleveland,
incarnation?
I don't remember if... well, they didn't win anything, so they didn't make my list. But I think they might be.
Yeah, they were the first West Coast team.
Because the
So-
Rams, I think I have them on one of these AFL teams in Cleveland, and then that was like the first West Coast team. That
Right.
and like another team.
And that's where the stadiums were. They
college
actually had the
stadiums.
biggest. Yeah, they had the biggest crowds
Yeah.
Yeah, but,
at that time. It was
Yeah.
record breaking attendance.
there was a
I think it was like
40,000...
58,000.
There was a 40,000 crowd for a 1924 game, and that set a record for a little bit. But you had 30 to 45 capacity, but you had some stadiums that could sit a lot
Well,
more.
the thing is too that you got to remember there was no indoor stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
So all those cities in the Midwest, you play the championship game, or like towards the end of the season, in the heart of winter, it's fucking
The frozen tundra.
terrible out there. dude.
Well, we do have indoor stadiums. There's a 1932. I'm going to get to that. That was played in an first indoor football game.
right.
Oh, look at
I'm
that.
saying, but the majority of them.
Yeah,
general,
it was
yeah,
open. It was
Yeah, they
open.
were freezing their ass
Yeah,
off.
there wasn't fucking all the shit they got now. Little insulated jackets and all that. You basically go out there and just freeze your balls
helmets.
off.
Yep. And
Nice.
now, and going back to Green Bay, now you live in Green Bay. It's like your birthright. You have to wait on a it's not a choice. You love the Packers. Like, I know a buddy of mine that
And cheese.
he was he
There's a lot of Green Bay fans down here, actually. Like Floridians. That I
For
know.
sure. But you have to be on a waiting list that's like a dozen years.
Yeah,
man.
I heard
It's
like when you're
crazy.
like a season ticket holder,
You never let that go.
and you
pass
die,
it
it's
on.
like in your will to like pass it down to your kids, and
All
Yep.
right, so where are we at here?
We're on 29. They had an
Yeah.
undefeated season, not a perfect season. 12-0-1.
The Steamrollers.
No, that was 28.
I'm sorry, Packers.
Yeah, the Packers were 12-0-1.
Okay.
And then that was 1929. 1930, Packers go 10-3-1. And then it starts to get a little boring. It's 12-2. Another championship, third in a row, 1931. 1932, the whole thing kind of changes now, right?
good.
We're gonna play. Now we're gonna play playoff games, right? We decided that because what happened was there was a tie a year or two before, and they just kind of voted on, or maybe it was 3 years before. That left a bad taste in the mouth of.
Yeah, because before the playoff game, like if you had the same record of
you had a
the,
vote.
there was either a vote or I think they played a game to like.
No, there was
to
no
settle.
game. There was
Well,
no
I think,
games.
Yeah, I think it was in my era that you play a game like to settle the tie, and whoever wins the game then goes in the championship game
Yes.
versus the other
Yeah,
team.
that happened in my era too. So like if in a division you ended up with the same record, you'd play one more game.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of like a wild card or
That happened.
Right.
That started to happen starting 1932. They changed the whole game.
Okay.
In terms of how they determine the champion. Now, top two teams division face each other. So what we have is there's only 8 teams in 1932.
I'm sorry. So to recap, first 11 champions, just best record or vote.
First 12
First 12, best record or vote.
or vote.
Now we're getting into the
Now here we are, year 13. League only has 8 teams, contracted way down from about 15 or 16 to 8. Chicago wins the first ever playoff game 9-0. They were 7-1-6, 6 ties. They beat your Portsmouth Spartans 7-6. Played in an 80-yard field.
who are now the Detroit Lions.
Detroit Lions, for all those that don't know. They played in an 80-yard
Oh, they
indoor.
fucking know. They know.
Doubt it.
This is
Don't be a
this,
dick.
this game was the closest.
I don't think people in Portsmouth remember the Portsmouth.
Where is Portsmouth anyway? Is that
It's in the mouth of the port right there, dude.
Sounds like somewhere in Oregon or something.
so? This was an arena football league game. It was played in an 80-yard indoor stadium. There were no sidelines. There was a wall where the
Did you just
sideline
say 80 yards?
80 yards.
Oh, wow.
There's a photo of it which I'll probably include right on this clip here.
Right here. Look at it right there.
There's a photo of it that it's in-
Portsmouth is in Ohio. You guys want to be dicks about it,
Oh, shit. It's not even in
wow, it's not
Detroit.
even in Michigan.
right?
Or in Michigan.
So 80-yard field, sidelines had walls. There was no, so when you hit the sideline, you hit a wall. But the innovation here was hash marks on the sidelines. Up to this point, had never been done. NFL loved it so much they kept it. The goalposts were at the goal line before.
to help you mark the ball, right?
yeah,
That's basically-
yeah, and it's also a better visual for the fan on the and eventually for TV.
Oh, I have an
right?
interesting story about the goalposts in my era.
A lot of changes to the
Well, the
goalposts
goalpost-
over the
well,
years.
In this particular era, the goalpost gets moved the following season. They loved it so much, which increased scoring. Think about it.
They love the pole, huh?
They move instead of having the goalpost at the back of the end zone, they move it to the front. So now it's 10 yards shorter to hit a field goal, right?
Yeah, but then you run into that shit. It's so
Yeah,
crazy,
isn't that great?
And there was no padding back
That
then.
shit was awesome back then.
Yeah.
Fucking
Anyway.
solid steel.
Can
and
you imagine if we had that now? With how
Negative 10
fast they
degree
are, and how
weather?
big they are, dudes running into the
It's like a
goalpost.
video of Zonka hitting one, remember?
Yeah.
Something like that with the So there was a couple rule changes based off that game. They loved a couple of aspects there. They brought it forward into 1933. 1933 is your era, right?
Yes, sir.
There was a major passing rule change in that era where they went from, what was it? Do you know what it was?
No.
I think they moved, instead of having to throw a pass 5 yards behind the line of scrimmage, you could say as long as you're behind the line of scrimmage, throw a pass.
So previously you had to drop back at least 5 yards, or I take the
Right.
snap at least 5
So
yards.
if you're scrambling and you're running forward towards the line of scrimmage and you throw a ball, that's illegal. You had to be 5 yards beyond
Behind
the
the
line
line
of
of
scrimmage to throw a pass.
Oh wow. Interesting.
Beyond
Behind.